Some voices are meant to guide us, others are meant to warn us. But what happens when a voice calls your name from absolute darkness, and when you turn to answer, there is nothing but empty air and the certainty that something impossible just reached across the veil between worlds? Jacob Hayes learned that some questions should never be answered, and some names should never be spoken in the halls of the dying. It started on a Tuesday. The kind of ordinary Tuesday that makes you believe the world follows predictable patterns. Jacob had been a paramedic for 8 years, long enough to recognize the rhythm of emergency calls, short enough to still feel the weight of every life he could not save. He worked the overnight shift at Mercy Falls Medical Center, a sprawling hospital complex on the edge of the city where the suburbs gave way to dense forest. The building was old, parts of it dated back to the 1930s. And like all old hospitals, it carried stories in its walls, stories of healing, stories of loss, and stories that no one wanted to speak about in daylight. The call came through at 2:37 in the morning. Respiratory distress, 4th floor, cardiac wing. Jacob and his partner Elena grabbed their equipment and moved quickly through the familiar corridors. The hospital at night was a different creature than during the day. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a tired hum. The hallways stretched longer, the shadows collected in corners like they were waiting for something. Jacob had walked these floors hundreds of times, but tonight, something felt off. The air tasted stale, metallic, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. They reached the patient's room, an elderly woman, 72 years old, congestive heart failure. Her breathing was shallow and labored. Jacob worked with practiced efficiency. Oxygen mask, vital signs, medication. Elena spoke to the woman in soothing tones, holding her hand, telling her she was safe. They stabilized her within minutes. The crisis passed. The woman's breathing eased. Her eyes closed in exhausted relief. Just another call. Just another night. Except it was not. As Jacob was packing up the equipment, he heard it. His name, Jacob. Spoken softly, barely above a whisper, but clear, unmistakable. He froze. The voice had come from behind him, from the darkened corner of the room where the light did not quite reach. He turned slowly. Nothing, just medical equipment and shadows. Elena looked up from her paperwork. "You okay?" Jacob forced a smile. "Yeah, just thought I heard something." She shrugged. "This old building creaks and groans all night. You get used to it." But Jacob knew the difference between a building settling and a voice speaking his name. They left the room and walked toward the elevator. The corridor was empty, silent except for the distant beeping of monitors and the soft hiss of ventilation systems. Then he heard it again. Jacob. Louder this time, more insistent. He spun around. The hallway behind him was deserted. No patients, no staff, no one. Elena stopped and turned back. "What is wrong? Did you hear that? Someone just said my name." She frowned. "I did not hear anything. Are you sure you are not just tired?" Jacob wanted to believe that. Exhaustion. His mind playing tricks. But the voice had been too real, too specific. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. As the doors began to close, Jacob glanced back down the corridor one last time, and he saw it. A figure, standing at the far end of the hall, motionless, watching. The figure was obscured by distance and shadow, but Jacob could feel its attention, fixed on him, burning. The elevator doors closed. Jacob's heart hammered in his chest. Elena was checking her phone, oblivious. "Did you see that?" "See what?" "There was someone standing in the hallway, just standing there, staring." Elena shook her head. "Probably a nurse, or a family member." Jacob did not respond, because he knew what he had seen, and it was not a nurse. The rest of the shift passed without incident, but Jacob could not shake the feeling of being watched. Every time he turned a corner, he expected to see that figure again. Every time he entered an empty room, he braced himself to hear his name whispered from the darkness. By the time 6 a.m. arrived and his shift ended, he was on edge, jumpy. He changed out of his uniform and headed for the parking lot. The early morning sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Ordinary, safe, real. Jacob climbed into his truck and sat for a moment, trying to calm his racing thoughts. It was nothing. Stress, lack of sleep, his imagination. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking space. As he drove toward the exit, he glanced in his rearview mirror, and his blood turned to ice. The figure was standing in the middle of the parking lot, perfectly still, watching him drive away. Jacob slammed on the brakes. He turned in his seat to look directly behind him. Nothing. The parking lot was empty. When he looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone. He drove home in a daze. His small apartment felt like a refuge. He locked the door, drew the curtains, tried to convince himself that he had imagined everything. But when he closed his eyes to sleep, he heard it again. That voice. Jacob. Soft, persistent, coming from somewhere inside his own bedroom. He opened his eyes and sat up. The room was empty, but the voice did not stop. Jacob, Jacob, over and over, like a prayer, like a plea, like a warning. He did not sleep that day. He could not. Every time he started to drift off, the voice returned. By the time his next shift rolled around, he was exhausted and terrified. He considered calling in sick, but something stopped him. A compulsion he could not explain. He needed to go back to Mercy Falls. He needed to understand what was happening. Because whatever was calling his name was not finished. It wanted something from him. And deep down, in a place beyond rational thought, Jacob knew that if he did not answer, something terrible would happen. That night, when he returned to the hospital, the air felt even heavier, more oppressive. The building seemed to lean in around him as if watching, waiting. Elena met him in the break room. "You look awful. Did you sleep at all?" Jacob shook his head. "Not really." She looked concerned but did not press. They received their first call within an hour. Seizure patient. 3rd floor. They responded quickly. But as they walked through the corridors, Jacob felt it again. That presence, following him. And then, cutting through the silence like a blade, he heard his name. Jacob. He stopped dead. Elena kept walking for a few steps before realizing he was not beside her. She turned back. "What now? Do you hear that?" Elena listened, tilted her head. Her expression changed, from concern to confusion, to fear. "Wait. Yes. I hear something." "What is that?" Jacob felt vindication and terror in equal measure. "You hear it too?" Elena nodded slowly. "It sounds like someone calling a name. But I cannot make out whose name. It is coming from down there." She pointed toward a darkened hallway that branched off from the main corridor. A service corridor. Rarely used. Jacob and Elena stood at the entrance to that dark hallway, staring into the shadows. The voice continued. "Jacob, Jacob, come here, please. We need you." And for the first time since this began, Jacob understood something crucial. This was not random. This was not a haunting meant for just anyone. Whatever was in that darkness, it had chosen him specifically. It knew his name. It wanted him. And despite every instinct screaming at him to run, to leave this hospital and never come back, Jacob took a step forward into the darkness. Because some calls cannot be ignored, some voices demand an answer, and some paramedics cannot walk away from someone crying for help, even when that someone should not exist. The service corridor swallowed them whole. The overhead lights were either broken or deliberately turned off. Only the dim emergency exit signs provided any illumination. Pools of sickly green light every 20 feet. Between them, absolute darkness. Jacob pulled out his flashlight. The beam cut through the shadows, revealing old storage carts, discarded equipment, and walls that had not seen fresh paint in decades. Elena stayed close behind him. Her breathing was shallow, nervous. The voice had stopped the moment they entered the corridor. Now there was only silence. Thick. Waiting. Jacob swept the flashlight across the hallway. This wing of the hospital had been closed for renovations 3 years ago, but the renovations never happened. Budget cuts, bureaucratic delays, the usual excuses. Now it just sat here, forgotten, a dead zone in the middle of a living building. "Why would someone be down here?" Elena whispered. "Why would anyone call for help from a place that has been abandoned?" Jacob did not have an answer, but he kept walking, driven by something beyond logic, beyond fear. They passed several closed doors. Patient rooms from a different era. Jacob tried one of the handles. Locked. He moved to the next. Also locked. The third door opened with a low groan of rusted hinges. Inside was a standard hospital room, empty bed, dusty medical equipment. A window covered with grime so thick that barely any light penetrated. The air smelled of mildew and decay. Elena peered over his shoulder. There is nothing here. Let us go back. Jacob was about to agree when he noticed something. On the small table beside the bed. A piece of paper. Fresh, clean, out of place. He walked over and picked it up. It was a patient intake form. Dated today. 2 hours ago. Patient name, Jacob Hayes. Admitted for unspecified trauma. Room assignment, 347. The room they were standing in. Jacob felt his stomach drop. This is not possible. This is my name, my information. But I am not a patient. I am staff. Elena looked at the form. Her face went pale. This is some kind of sick joke. Someone is messing with you. But who would even know you were working tonight? Who has access to these forms? Jacob had no answers, only questions that multiplied with every passing second. He folded the paper and shoved it into his pocket. They left the room and continued down the corridor. The voice started again, softer now, almost sad. Jacob, please, I do not have much time. You are the only one who can hear me, the only one who can help. Elena grabbed Jacob's arm. I hear it too. It is coming from up ahead. End of the hall. Jacob nodded. They moved forward carefully. The corridor ended at a set of double doors. Old operating theater. Decommissioned in the 80s. Beyond those doors was supposed to be nothing but empty space and outdated surgical equipment. Jacob pushed the doors open. They swung inward with a metallic shriek. The operating theater was massive. Tiered observation seating rose up on 3 sides. In the center, under a cluster of ancient surgical lights, stood a single operating table. And on that table lay a body, covered with a white sheet. Jacob and Elena froze. Elena's voice shook. Is that a real person? Is someone actually in here? Jacob approached slowly. His flashlight beam trembled. He reached out and pulled back the sheet. The face beneath was pale, lifeless. A young man, maybe 30 years old, dark hair, peaceful expression. But what stopped Jacob's heart was the name tag pinned to the man's chest. Hospital staff identification. Name, Jacob Hayes. Position, paramedic. The same information, the same name. But the face was not his. Elena gasped. What is happening? Who is this? Jacob could barely speak. I do not know. But this is not right. This is not real. He checked for a pulse. Nothing. The body was cold, dead for hours, possibly longer. But if this person had been here that long, why had no one discovered them? Why had no alarms been raised? And why did they have Jacob's name and credentials? Elena pulled out her radio. We need to call this in. We need security and the police. Now. But before she could press the button, every light in the operating theater blazed to life. Blinding. Overwhelming. Jacob shielded his eyes. When his vision adjusted, he saw that the observation seats were no longer empty. They were filled with people. Dozens of them. All dressed in hospital gowns. All staring down at him with blank expressions. Silent. Unmoving. Elena screamed. Jacob grabbed her arm. We need to leave. Right now. They turned toward the exit, but the double doors had closed. Locked from the outside. Jacob pulled on the handles. They would not budge. Elena pounded on the metal. Help. Someone help us. We are trapped in here. The lights flickered. Once, twice, then stabilized. When Jacob turned back to face the room, all the figures in the observation seats had shifted position. They were leaning forward now, watching intently, and the body on the operating table was sitting up. The sheet fell away. The man with Jacob's name tag turned his head slowly. His eyes opened. They were completely black. Voids. He spoke with a voice that echoed from everywhere at once. You came. I knew you would. Because you cannot ignore a call for help. It is not in your nature. You save people, even when they are already gone. Jacob forced himself to speak. Who are you? What do you want from me? The figure smiled. Sad. Hollow. I am what happens when someone dies alone and forgotten in this place. I am the echo of every patient who slipped away while the staff was too busy to notice. Every person who called for help and was ignored. Every soul that faded into nothing because there was no one there to witness their passing. I am the accumulated loneliness of this hospital. And I have been waiting for someone like you. Someone who still cares. Someone who still listens. Elena was crying now, pressed against the locked doors. Jacob stepped forward. If you are all those people, all those lost souls, then tell me what you need. How can I help you? The figure tilted its head. We do not need saving. We are already gone. What we need is to be remembered, to be acknowledged, to know that our deaths matter to someone, anyone. You have spent 8 years saving lives, but how many deaths have you witnessed? How many patients have you lost? And how often do you think about them afterward? Jacob felt the question hit like a physical blow. Because the truth was painful. He remembered the saves, the victories, the moments when he brought someone back from the edge. But the losses? He pushed those down, buried them, moved on to the next call because dwelling on failure would destroy him. The figure nodded as if reading his thoughts. Exactly. You forget us. Everyone forgets us. We are the acceptable casualties, the statistics, the unavoidable percentages. But we were people. We had names, families, dreams. And when we died, we deserved more than to be erased from memory. The figures in the observation seats began to stand, moving in perfect synchronization. They descended the stairs, slowly, deliberately, surrounding Jacob and Elena. Elena was hyperventilating. Jacob, we need to get out. Please, we need to get out now. Jacob looked at the approaching figures. He saw their faces clearly now, and with a sickening jolt of recognition, he knew them, all of them. The elderly man from a cardiac arrest 6 months ago. The teenager from a motorcycle accident last year. The woman who overdosed 3 years ago despite his best efforts. Every patient he had lost. Every face he had tried to forget. They were all here, all watching him with hollow eyes and silent accusation. The figure on the table spoke again. Tonight, you will remember us. Tonight you will carry our names, our stories, our final moments. Because we refuse to disappear. We refuse to be nothing. And if that means trapping you here, in this place between life and death, then so be it. You will become one of us. Another forgotten soul calling out in the darkness. Another voice that no one answers. Jacob realized with horrifying clarity what was happening. This was not a haunting. This was a reckoning. And unless he found a way to break free, he and Elena would join these lost souls. Trapped forever in the abandoned wing of Mercy Falls Medical Center, calling for help that would never come. The circle of figures tightened around Jacob and Elena. The temperature in the operating theater plummeted. Breath became visible mist. Jacob could feel the cold seeping into his bones. Elena collapsed against him, trembling. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please, I did not do anything. I am new. I have only been a paramedic for 6 months. I have not lost anyone yet. Please let me go. The figures ignored her. Their hollow eyes remained fixed on Jacob. This was his judgment, his reckoning. She was simply collateral damage. Jacob's mind raced. He had faced death before, had stared it down countless times in emergency rooms and accident scenes. But this was different. This was not a battle he could win with adrenaline and medical training. This required something else. Something he was not sure he possessed. The figure on the table stood up, walked toward him with slow, measured steps. Its movements were fluid, yet wrong, like a puppet being controlled by invisible strings. It stopped inches from Jacob's face. When it spoke, its breath smelled of formaldehyde and rot. Do you remember me, Jacob? Jacob stared at the face. Recognition flickered. Fragments of memory. A call 3 years ago. Winter night. Car accident on the highway, multiple casualties. This man had been one of them. Severe head trauma, internal bleeding. Jacob had worked on him for 20 minutes. Chest compressions. Defibrillator. Advanced medications. Nothing worked. The man died on the gurney, in the ambulance, before they even reached the hospital. Jacob's voice cracked. Robert Chen, you were a lawyer, married, 2 kids. You were coming home from a business dinner when a drunk driver crossed the median. The figure nodded slowly. I died listening to you tell me I was going to be okay. Listening to you lie. Because you knew. You knew I was already gone. But you kept pretending. Kept giving me false hope. And then you left me in the morgue and never thought about me again. Jacob felt guilt rising in his throat like bile. I did not lie to comfort myself. I lied to comfort you. So you would not die in terror. So your last moments would not be filled with despair. Robert's expression did not change. But what about after? What about the weeks and months and years that followed? Did you think about my wife? About how she screams my name in her sleep? About my children who drew pictures of me and left them on my grave? Did you carry any of that? Or did you just move on to the next call? The next patient? The next convenient forgetting? Jacob had no answer. Because Robert was right. He had moved on. He had to. Carrying every loss would have destroyed him. Would have made it impossible to keep working. Keep saving others. But standing here now, surrounded by the faces of the forgotten, that justification felt hollow. Selfish. The other figures began to speak, one by one, each voice overlapping, creating a chorus of accusation and pain. I was 19. Drug overdose. You called me a waste. I heard you say it to your partner. You thought I could not hear, but I could. A middle-aged woman stepped forward. I had cancer. Terminal. I coded in the ambulance. You tried to resuscitate me even though my chart said DNR. You ignored my wishes, forced me to endure more suffering. Another voice. Elderly man. Stroke. I was alone in my apartment for 2 days before anyone found me. When you arrived, I saw the disgust in your eyes. I saw how you could barely stand to touch me. You did your job, but you did it with contempt. Each accusation was a knife, each memory a wound reopening. Jacob wanted to defend himself, to explain that he was human, that he could not be perfect, that he made mistakes under pressure and exhaustion and the weight of impossible expectations. But the words died in his throat. Because underneath the excuses, he knew there was truth in what they were saying. He had judged, he had failed, he had forgotten, and these souls had paid the price for his imperfection. Elena grabbed his hand. Her grip was desperate. Jacob, tell them you are sorry. Tell them you remember now. Maybe that is what they need to hear. Jacob looked at her, then at the circle of accusing faces. He opened his mouth. I am sorry. I remember you now. All of you, and I will carry your names forward. I will honor your memories. Please, let us go. The figures did not move. Robert shook his head slowly. Words are easy. Memory is cheap. We do not want your apologies. We want you to understand what it feels like. To be helpless. To be forgotten. To call for help and have no one answer. The lights went out. Complete darkness. Jacob heard Elena scream. He felt hands grabbing him. Cold, strong, pulling him away from her. He fought against them, but there were too many. They dragged him across the floor. He heard metal scraping. Then he was lifted and slammed down onto something hard, the operating table. Restraints snapped across his wrists and ankles. He struggled but could not break free. The lights flickered back on. Jacob was strapped to the table, staring up at the cluster of ancient surgical lights. Elena was pinned against the wall by several figures. Unable to move, unable to help. Robert stood over Jacob. In his hand was a scalpel. Rusted. Ancient. He brought it close to Jacob's chest. Not to cut. Just to let him feel the cold metal against his skin. You spend your life trying to save people. But have you ever stopped to think about what it feels like to be the one who needs saving? To be completely vulnerable? Completely dependent on someone else's competence and compassion? Jacob's heart was racing, his breathing shallow. This is what they felt. Your patients, in their final moments, terrified, helpless, praying that you would be enough. And when you were not enough, when they slipped away despite your efforts, they went into the darkness carrying that fear, that abandonment, that final betrayal of hope. Jacob understood now. This was not about punishment. It was about empathy. About forcing him to experience what he had witnessed so many times but never truly felt. The scalpel pressed harder. Not breaking skin, just pressure. Robert leaned close. If I were to cut you open right now, if I were to let you bleed out on this table while calling for help that never comes, would that make us even? Would that balance the scales? Jacob's voice shook. No. It would just create more pain, more death, more souls trapped in this cycle. Robert smiled, bitter, knowing. Then what do you suggest? How do we find peace when peace was stolen from us? Jacob closed his eyes, took a breath, spoke from the deepest part of himself, the part that had chosen this profession not for glory, but for purpose. You cannot find peace through my suffering, only through release, through letting go of the pain and anger that keeps you chained here. I cannot change what happened. I cannot bring any of you back, but I can promise to do better, to remember, to honor every patient, living or dead, to carry their stories with respect, to never again treat loss as acceptable, as forgettable. That is all I can offer. My commitment, my changed heart. The room fell silent. The figures stood motionless, considering. Then Robert lowered the scalpel. He looked at Jacob with those hollow black eyes, and for just a moment something flickered in them. Something almost human, almost hopeful. You mean that? You will truly remember us? Jacob nodded. Every single one of you. I swear it. Robert stepped back. The restraints on Jacob's wrists and ankles released simultaneously. He sat up slowly, rubbing feeling back into his hands. The figures began to retreat, moving back toward the observation seats. But they did not disappear. They waited, watching, as if testing whether Jacob's words were genuine or just another desperate lie. Then Elena spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. Wait, there is something wrong with this, something we are missing. She pointed at the body that had been on the table, the one with Jacob's name tag. If that is supposed to be you, Jacob, then who is it really? Where did it come from? Jacob looked at the corpse, the face he did not recognize, the credentials that were not his, and a terrible realization began to form. What if this was not about the past? What if this was about the future? What if everything they had seen tonight was not a haunting, but a warning? Jacob walked to the body on the table, examined it more closely. The face was unfamiliar, but the details were wrong in ways he had not noticed before. The name tag was printed, not the usual hospital issue badge with a photo. The uniform was outdated, the style they used to wear a decade ago. And the body itself, despite appearing dead, showed no signs of rigor mortis, no lividity, no decay. It was not a real corpse. It was a representation, a symbol. Jacob's voice was steady now. This is not a person. This is a message. You are showing me something. Something that has not happened yet. Robert stepped forward again. His expression had changed. Less angry, more sad. You are beginning to understand. We did not bring you here to punish you for the past. We brought you here to prevent a future. Your future. Jacob felt ice spreading through his chest. What do you mean? Robert gestured to the body. 3 weeks from now, you will respond to a call. 4th floor, cardiac wing, the same place where this all started tonight. A patient in respiratory distress. But you will be distracted, exhausted. You will have worked 4 double shifts in 6 days. Your judgment will be impaired, and you will make a mistake. Elena moved closer, listening intently. What kind of mistake? Robert's voice was hollow. He will administer the wrong dosage of medication. A decimal point error. Simple, human, fatal. The patient will go into cardiac arrest, and despite everything Jacob does to save them, they will die. And the guilt will consume him. Within 6 months, he will quit. Within a year, he will be gone. Not dead, but hollow. A ghost walking among the living. Just like us. Jacob shook his head. No. I would never. I am careful. I double-check everything. Robert's expression was pitiful. That is what you tell yourself now. But exhaustion erodes caution. Stress corrupts precision. You are already on that path. We can see it. We can feel it. Because we have seen it happen to others before you. Jacob looked around at the gathered figures. The lost souls. Are all of you here because of medical errors? Because of mistakes made by tired, overworked staff? A woman stepped forward. Young. Nurses' scrubs. I gave a patient the wrong blood type. I had been on shift for 16 hours. I misread the label. The patient died. I could not live with what I had done. So I did not. She gestured to herself. Now I am here, trapped between worlds, warning others, trying to prevent what I could not prevent for myself. Another voice. Elderly doctor. White coat stained and faded. I performed surgery while impaired. Not drugs, not alcohol, just pure exhaustion. 36 hours without sleep. Hospital administration demanded it. We were understaffed. I made a mistake, nicked an artery. The patient bled out on the table. I lost my license, my career, my will to continue. The figures all shared the same story, different details, same core truth. They were not victims of malice. They were victims of a system that ground people down until they broke. And when they broke, they took others with them. Jacob felt the weight of recognition. He had been pushing himself too hard, taking extra shifts to pay bills, to prove himself, to outrun the memories of his failures. But in doing so, he was setting himself up for a catastrophic mistake, the kind that would destroy not just a patient, but himself. Robert spoke again. We brought you here to show you what lies ahead if you do not change course. That body on the table is the person you will become. Empty, haunted, lost. And the patient you will fail is someone who does not deserve to die because you were too stubborn or too proud to admit you needed rest. Elena grabbed Jacob's shoulder. He is right. You have been working yourself into the ground. I have seen it. Everyone has seen it. You take shifts no one else wants. You never say no. You act like you are invincible, but you are not. You are human. And humans break. Jacob wanted to argue, to insist he was fine. But standing in this room, surrounded by the consequences of denial, he could not lie anymore. You are right. I am exhausted. I am running on empty. But I do not know how to stop. If I slow down, if I rest, people might die because I was not there to save them. Robert shook his head. People will die because you were there but not capable. There is a difference between dedication and self-destruction. You have crossed that line. And if you do not step back, you will take innocent lives with you when you fall. The room began to change. The figures started to fade, their forms becoming translucent. Wisps of smoke. Robert looked at his own hands as they dissolved. We have delivered our warning. What you do with it is your choice. But know this, Jacob Hayes. We did not call you into this darkness to destroy you. We called you here to save you. Because unlike us, you still have time. You can still choose a different path. Jacob reached out instinctively. Wait, what happens to you now? Where do you go? Robert smiled. Sad but genuine. We do not know. Maybe nowhere. Maybe somewhere. But our purpose is fulfilled. We have prevented one more tragedy. One more soul from joining this limbo. That is enough. That has to be enough. The figures disappeared completely. The operating theater returned to its abandoned state. Dust. Decay. Empty observation seats. The body on the table was gone. The restraints. The scalpel. All of it vanished as if it had never existed. Jacob and Elena stood alone in the silent room. The double doors were no longer locked. They opened easily. The corridor beyond was lit with normal overhead lights. No darkness. No voices. Just a forgotten section of an old hospital. They walked back toward the main building in stunned silence. When they reached the elevator, Elena finally spoke. Did that really happen? Or did we both hallucinate the same thing? Jacob pulled the folded intake form from his pocket, the one with his name and information. But when he unfolded it, the paper was blank. Aged. Yellow. Nothing written on it at all. He looked at Elena. I do not know what was real, but the message was, I need to change. I need to step back before I hurt someone, before I become one of them. Elena nodded. I will talk to the supervisor tomorrow. Tell them you need time off. Tell them you are burnt out. They cannot fire you for being honest about your limits. Jacob wanted to believe that, but he knew the reality of their profession. Admitting weakness often meant being seen as unreliable, as a liability. But the alternative was worse, becoming a cautionary tale. A ghost story told by future paramedics in break rooms and locker rooms. They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened on the ground floor, everything was normal. Staff moving through corridors, patients being wheeled to rooms, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, life continuing, oblivious to the supernatural intervention that had just occurred in the abandoned wing above. Jacob and Elena checked out early, claimed illness. No one questioned it. They walked to the parking lot together. The sun was beginning to rise, pink and gold light washing over the world, making everything look clean, new, possible. Elena hugged him before getting into her car. Thank you for not leaving me in there, for staying even when you were terrified. Jacob hugged her back. Thank you for believing me, for hearing the voice when I thought I was losing my mind. She pulled away and looked him in the eyes. Promise me you will take care of yourself. Promise me you will not let this job kill you. Jacob nodded. I promise. And he meant it, because he had seen the alternative, had stood face to face with what happened when dedication turned to obsession, when helping others became an excuse for self-destruction. He drove home as the city woke up around him, but his mind was not on the road. It was on a question that refused to be silenced. If those spirits could see his future, could see the mistake he was going to make, did that mean the future was fixed? Or had their warning changed it? Had he already altered the timeline simply by being made aware? Or was he still on a path toward that devastating error, and the only difference now was that he would see it coming? Jacob did not return to work the next day, or the day after that. He called the hospital administration and requested a leave of absence. 2 weeks. Unpaid. They were not happy. They reminded him of staffing shortages, of his responsibilities, of how difficult it would be to cover his shifts, but he held firm. And eventually, they agreed. Because even institutions built on sacrifice understand, at some level, that broken people cannot heal others. They can only spread the fracture. During those 2 weeks, Jacob did something he had not done in 8 years. He rested. Actually rested. Not the restless sleep between shifts. Not the anxious hours scrolling through his phone waiting for the next call. Real rest. He slept without setting an alarm. He sat in silence without feeling guilty. He took walks in the park and noticed things he had stopped seeing. Birds, trees, the way sunlight filtered through leaves. Small, ordinary miracles that required nothing from him except presence. He also started therapy, something he had always dismissed as unnecessary, a luxury for people with easier problems. But the encounter in the operating theater had shattered that illusion. He needed help processing what he had experienced, and more importantly, he needed help understanding why he had been pushing himself to the breaking point. The therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Reeves, asked him a question in their second session that changed everything. Who are you trying to save, Jacob? The patients? Or yourself? He did not have an answer at first, but over the following sessions, the truth emerged. Every life he saved was proof that he mattered, that his existence had value, that he was not helpless in the face of death. He had spent 8 years trying to outrun his own fear of insignificance by becoming indispensable, by being the paramedic who never said no, who never rested, who sacrificed everything for the job. But in doing so, he had turned himself into a ticking time bomb, and the spirits had seen it, had intervened, had pulled him back from the edge before he took someone else with him. 3 weeks after the incident, Jacob returned to Mercy Falls Medical Center, but he returned different. He worked his assigned shifts, no more, no less. When he felt tired, he said so. When he needed help, he asked for it. And when he responded to calls, he was present in a way he had not been before. Not distracted by guilt or driven by the need to prove himself. Just there, doing the work, honoring each patient, living or dying. As a person, not a statistic. On his first shift back, the call came through. 4th floor, cardiac wing, respiratory distress. The exact scenario Robert had warned him about. Jacob felt his heart rate spike. This was it. The moment. The test. He and Elena grabbed their equipment and rushed to the room. The patient was an elderly man, oxygen levels dropping, struggling to breathe. Jacob assessed the situation, prepared the medication, and then he stopped. Double-checked the dosage, triple-checked, asked Elena to verify. She looked at the syringe and nodded. Correct. He administered it. The patient stabilized, crisis averted. No error, no tragedy. Afterward, in the hallway, Elena pulled him aside. You were different in there, more careful, more present. What changed? Jacob thought about telling her everything. About the spirits, the warning, the glimpse of his own future lying dead on an operating table. But instead, he simply said, I learned that being a hero is not about never making mistakes. It is about creating systems and habits that minimize them. It is about knowing your limits and respecting them. She smiled. That is very mature of you. Boring. But mature. Jacob laughed. It was the first genuine laugh he had experienced in months. Months passed. Jacob continued working, continued healing. He started a support group for first responders struggling with burnout and trauma. Others joined. Paramedics, firefighters, ER nurses, people who had been carrying the weight of impossible expectations alone for too long. They shared stories, not of heroism, but of failure, of fear, of the moments they almost broke. And in sharing, they found something more valuable than glory. They found solidarity, understanding, permission to be human. One night, Jacob was cleaning out his locker when he found something wedged in the back corner, a small folded piece of paper. He pulled it out and opened it. It was the intake form, the one with his name, but it was no longer blank. Written in faded ink were the words, "Thank you for listening. You changed your path. Now help others change theirs." It was unsigned, but Jacob knew who it was from. The spirits, the forgotten souls, the ones who had cared enough to intervene. He folded the paper carefully and put it in his wallet. A reminder, not of what almost happened, but of what was prevented. Of the power of compassion extending beyond death, of the importance of heeding warnings before they become tragedies. He returned to his shift with renewed purpose, not to save everyone. That was impossible, but to honor everyone. To see each patient as a person with a story, with people who would mourn them, with a life that mattered, whether he saved them or not. The hospital continued its endless rhythm. Emergency calls, stabilizations, losses, victories, the cycle that never stopped. But Jacob was no longer drowning in it. He had learned to swim, to pace himself, to recognize that sustainability was not selfishness, that taking care of himself was taking care of his patients. Because a rested, present, careful paramedic saved more lives than an exhausted, distracted, hero-complex-driven one ever could. The math was simple. The execution was hard, but necessary. Sometimes, late at night, when the hospital was quiet, Jacob would walk past the service corridor. The entrance to the abandoned wing. The doors were still there, still unlocked. But he never went back in. He did not need to. The message had been delivered, the lesson learned, the future altered, and the spirits, wherever they were now, had moved on, released from their vigil, free to find whatever peace existed beyond the veil. Jacob thought about them often, about Robert and the nurse and the doctor and all the others, about the system that had failed them, about the culture that demanded perfection from imperfect people. And he wondered how many others were out there right now, walking the same path he had been on, headed toward the same devastating mistake. How many could be saved if someone just told them the truth? That rest is not weakness, that limits are not failure, that being human is not a flaw to overcome, but a reality to accept. So he told them, every chance he got, in the support group, in conversations with new paramedics, in small moments of honesty when someone asked how he managed the stress. He told them about burnout, about mistakes, about the importance of stepping back before you fall. He never mentioned the spirits. That part remained private, sacred, but the message was the same. Take care of yourself so you can take care of others. Honor the living by honoring your own limits. Save lives by not sacrificing your own. And people listened, Some dismissed him as overly cautious, as lacking dedication. But others heard the truth beneath the words. They saw someone who had walked to the edge and stepped back, someone who had been given a second chance and was using it to help others find theirs. And slowly, one conversation at a time, the culture began to shift. Not everywhere, not quickly, but enough to matter, enough to prevent a few more tragedies, a few more souls from joining the chorus of the forgotten. Have you ever been warned by something you could not explain? Have you ever felt a presence pulling you back from a decision that would have destroyed you? Sometimes fear is not the enemy. Sometimes it is the messenger. The voice calling your name from the darkness, begging you to listen before it is too late. What will you do when that voice finds you? Will you ignore it? Or will you have the courage to stop, to listen, to change course before the path you are on leads to a future you cannot escape? Share your thoughts below, because we all carry warnings we have not heeded yet. And maybe by speaking them out loud, we can save ourselves and each other from becoming cautionary tales. In the end, perhaps the real miracle was fear.